trying to explain what's going on in the solar system as it pertains to the presence of Planet 9, Planet 9X. We think we know exactly where this object is. We've diagrammed it and plotted it many times for people, and it is moving, but it's moving in a straight line. It's not moving all around the solar system like other people have this object doing. The magnetosphere standoff showed you the magnetosphere is nicely inflated with electrons, probably. And we notice that on the Enlil spiral, these spirals go all the way out past Jupiter, and you can see the further away they get from the sun, the more concentrated the density becomes. That defies all laws of physics. The middle pie cut, you can see the magnetosphere line, the actual magnetic field line, is always going north, gets pulled south by coronal hole streams, but for some reason it's pointing north. And we go to the only true multiple, how do I say this? This shows all the magnetic fields on the sun, and we see that the south coronal hole stream is not putting out any magnetic anomalies. So I went to the synoptic. I couldn't find it anymore. That tells you how negative and how positive the charges are. This is pretty much how it should look. The South Pole should be putting out magnetosphere, should putting out an IMF, an electromagnetic field, but we don't see that at all, hardly right now. It's hard to explain why the South Pole isn't doing that, but the South Pole of the Sun is undergoing many bizarre things, and as the magnetic field looks very complicated, we see repeating pulses coming out of the South Pole of the Sun on some of the CME diagrams and some of the CME tracking sites. Solar Seeds, SEEDS, by Marshall University, has the South Pole of the Sun pulsing in stereo A, but we see that the coronal hole IMF for some reason is not propagating southward. Though it kind of lends credibility to the pie cut, which showed you the magnetic field line headed north. And we know this object is about 30 to 40 degrees above the ecliptic, and it sure looks like that's where a lot of these magnetic field lines are pointing. It should be coming out of the south. And when they do come out of the south, they get caught up in the loops and get pulled back in. So we're thinking that there is only one pole on this brown dwarf that is facing us right now, and we're not getting the effects of both of its poles. Remember, it's laying on its side, so that means it's very, very likely that this object, Planet 9, is pointing just one pole at us, so we're getting just one polarity. That would account for the wobble that just started again. It's a very minor wobble, and it would account for a consistent abnormality in one of the poles of the sun. Those green field lines are usually made from active regions, creating magnetic loops. But then when you have electrons shooting through those loops, you get what's called streamers. But again, I'm really trying to impose upon you, there's something different about the south coronal hole. It's supposed to be putting out and look just like the north, but it's not, and it's constantly like this. And I wish I could connect all the dots for you, but at this point I can't, and it's going to take some work. But it would really help if I could find the synoptic chart that used to be on SolarHam, used to be on SDO. So once again, we see that it's getting harder and harder to track the effects of Planet 9 on the solar system. And I've captured several screenshots for you of some of the most striking anomalies, but it's hard to explain why we're not seeing anything coming out of the south pole of the sun. And people say, well, it's because of the sunspots. Well, during solar maximum, we had coronal hole IMFs coming out of the north and the south, and we're not seeing that. We're not seeing that the coronal active regions are influencing. In fact, some of the connectivity we see from the South Pole is to other coronal holes and other IMFs, and not exactly to the active regions themselves, not to the sunspots themselves, although sometimes we see some of the closed loops. Those red lines are closed loops. We go to the magnetosphere diagram and we see a nice expanded magnetosphere. We see extra banding or extra belts of electrons, meaning we got a lot of electrons. We see that the inner part of the magnetosphere is kind of devoid of energy and particles, mainly because it's saturated with low energy electrons. And they have a repelling force against one another and act kind of like a force field. The higher energy electrons don't do that. They create a lot more energy. Let's see, what is this? This is another spiral that we're showing you, that how the further away you get from the sun, the more concentrated the particles become. The concentration that increases as you get further from the sun is not as striking as it was a month ago, but it's still there. That means the brown dwarf is getting further away. Here's another pie cut in the middle, showing you the magnetic field Earth connectivity is what? It's about 30, 40 degrees above the ecliptic. It's probably pointing right at that position of the brown dwarf. And we're going to be passing in between that brown dwarf in about 2 weeks. So then we're going to look at what the earthquakes are doing. When we look at the global earthquake map, we see an uptick. A lot of those blues are fresh quakes. We've had a 6-pointer, 5.9 in a couple places, in the usual places. But the southern Antarctic ridge appears to be moving again, shifting. We got also an earthquake at the top, and Canada's had a few quakes. So it looks like we're starting to pick up earthquake activity as we approach this alignment. And in the South Indian Ocean, we point that there's a ridge there, and when we get a couple earthquakes down near the bottom, or several scattered, Arizona has an earthquake. Arizona, a seismically inactive state for the most part, it just had another earthquake smack dab in the middle of the state, about 25 miles south of Winslow. So that's your solar system update for the day. We got to run down what the heck is going on with the southern coronal hole on the sun.